conscientious night watchman, who first does his duty by quelling disturbances so as not to waken the citizen, but equally does his duty quite properly when he awakens the street should the causes of the trouble seem to him serious and himself unable to cope with them alone. This function of dreams becomes especially well marked when there arises some incentive for the sense perception. That the senses aroused during sleep influence the dream is well known, and can be experimentally verified. It is one of the certain but much overestimated results of the medical investigation of dreams. Hitherto, there has been an insoluble riddle connected with this discovery. The stimulus to the sense, by which the investigator affects the sleeper, is not properly recognized in the dream, but is intermingled with a number of indefinite interpretations, whose determination appears left to psychical free will. There is, of course, no such psychical free will. To an external sense stimulus, the sleeper can react in many ways. Either he awakens, or he succeeds in sleeping on. In the latter case, he can make use of the dream to dismiss the external stimulus, and this, again, in more ways than one. For instance, he can stay the stimulus by dreaming of a scene which is absolutely intolerable to him. This was the means used by one who was troubled by a painful perineal abscess. He dreamt that he was on horseback, and made use of the poultice, which was intended to alleviate his pain, as a saddle, and thus got away from the cause of the trouble. Or, as is more frequently the case, the external stimulus undergoes a new rendering, which leads him to connect it with a repressed desire seeking its realization, and robs him of its reality, and is treated as if it were part of the psychical matter. Thus, someone dreamt that he had written a comedy which embodied a definite motif. It was being performed. The first act was over amid enthusiastic applause. There was great clapping. At this moment, the dreamer must have succeeded in prolonging his sleep despite the disturbance, for when he woke he no longer heard the noise. He concluded rightly that someone must have been beating a carpet or bed. The dreams which come with a loud noise just before waking have all attempted to cover the stimulus to waking by some other explanation, and thus to prolong the sleep for a little while. Whosoever has firmly accepted this censorship as the chief motive for the distortion of dreams will not be surprised to learn, as the result of dream interpretation, that most of the dreams of adults are traced by analysis to erotic desires. This assertion is not drawn from dreams obviously of a sexual nature, which are known to all dreamers from their own experience, and are the only ones usually described as sexual dreams. These dreams are ever sufficiently mysterious by reason of the choice of persons who are made the objects of sex, the removal of all the barriers which cry halt to the dreamer's sexual needs in his waking state, the many strange reminders as to details of what are called perversions. But analysis discovers that, in many other dreams, in whose manifest content nothing erotic can be found, the work of interpretation shows them up as, in reality, realization of sexual desires, whilst on the other hand, that much of the thought-making while awake, the thoughts saved us as surplus from the day only, reaches presentation in dreams with the help of repressed erotic desires. Towards the explanation of this statement, which is no theoretical postulate, it must be remembered that no other class of instincts has required so vast a suppression at the behest of civilization as the sexual, whilst their mastery by the highest psychical processes are in most persons soonest of all relinquished. Since we have learned to understand infantile sexuality, often so vague in its expression, so invariably overlooked and misunderstood, we are justified in saying that nearly every civilized person has retained at some point or other the infantile type of sex life. Thus we understand that repressed infantile sex desires furnish the most frequent and most powerful impulses for the formation of dreams. If the dream, which is the expression of some erotic desire, succeeds in making its manifest content appear innocently asexual, it is only possible in one way. The matter of these sexual presentations cannot be exhibited as such, but must be replaced by illusions, suggestions, and similar indirect means. Differing from other cases of indirect presentation, those used in dreams must be deprived of direct understanding. The means of presentation which answer these requirements are commonly termed symbols. A special interest has been directed towards these, since it has been observed that the dreamers of the same language use the like symbols. Indeed, that in certain cases, community of symbol is greater than community of speech. Since the dreamers do not themselves know the meaning of the symbols they use, it remains a puzzle whence arises their relationship with what they replace and denote. The fact itself is undoubted, and becomes of importance for the technique of the interpretation of dreams, since by the aid of a knowledge of this symbolism, it is possible to understand the meaning of the elements of a dream, or parts of a dream, occasionally even the whole dream itself, without having to question the dreamer as to his own ideas. We thus come near to the popular idea of an interpretation of dreams, and, on the other hand, possess again the technique of the ancients, among whom the interpretation of dreams was identical with their explanation through symbolism. Though the study of dream symbolism is far removed from finality, we now possess a series of general statements and of particular observations which are quite certain. Footnote: the words from "and" to "channels" in the next sentence is a short summary of the passage in the original. As this book will be read by other than professional people, the passage has not been translated in deference to English opinion. Translator. There are symbols which practically always have the same meaning. Emperor and empress, king and queen, always mean the parents, room, a woman, and so on. The sexes are represented by a great variety of symbols, many of which would be at first quite incomprehensible, had not the clues to the meaning been often obtained through other channels. There are symbols of universal circulation, found in all dreamers, of one range of speech and culture. There are others of the narrowest individual significance which an individual has built up out of his own material. In the first class, those can be differentiated whose claim can at once be recognized by the replacement of sexual things in common speech, those, for instance, arising from agriculture as reproduction, seed. From others, whose sexual references appear to reach back to the earliest times and to the obscurest depths of our image building. The power of building symbols in both these special forms of symbols has not died out. Recently discovered things, like the airship, are at once brought into universal use as sex symbols. It would be quite an error to suppose that a profounder knowledge of dream symbolism, the language of dreams, would make us independent of questioning the dreamer regarding his impressions about the dream, and would give us back the whole technique of ancient dream interpreters. Apart from individual symbols and the variations in the use of what is general, one never knows whether an element in the dream is to be understood symbolically or in its proper meaning. The whole content of the dream is certainly not to be interpreted symbolically. The knowledge of dream symbols will only help us in understanding portions of the dream content, and does not render the use of the technical rules previously given at all superfluous. But it must be of the greatest service in interpreting a dream just when the impressions of the dreamer are withheld or are insufficient. Dream symbolism proves also indispensable for understanding the so-called typical dreams and the dreams that repeat themselves. Dream symbolism leads us far beyond the dream. It does not belong only to dreams, but is likewise dominant in legend, myth, and saga, in wit, and in folklore. It compels us to pursue the inner meaning of the dream in these productions. But we must acknowledge that symbolism is not a result of the dream work, but is a peculiarity, probably of our unconscious thinking, which furnishes to the dream work the matter for condensation, displacement, and dramatization. End of chapter 3.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Gesine. Dream Psychology by Sigmund Freud. Translated by M.D. Eder. Chapter 4. Dream Analysis. Perhaps we shall now begin to suspect that dream interpretation is capable of giving us hints about the structure of our psychic apparatus, which we have thus far expected in vain from philosophy. We shall not, however, follow this track, but return to our original problem as soon as we have cleared up the subject of dream disfigurement. The question has arisen how dreams with disagreeable content can be analyzed as the fulfillment of wishes. We see now that this is possible in case dream disfigurement has taken place, in case the disagreeable content serves only as a disguise for what is wished. Keeping in mind our assumptions in regard to the two psychic instances, we may now proceed to say, disagreeable dreams, as a matter of fact, contain something which is disagreeable to the second instance, but which at the same time fulfills a wish of the first instance. They are wish dreams, in the sense that every dream originates in the first instance, while the second instance acts towards the dream only in repelling, not in a creative manner. If we limit ourselves to a consideration of what the second instance contributes to the dream, we can never understand the dream. If we do so, all the riddles which the authors have found in the dream remain unsolved. That the dream actually has a secret meaning, which turns out to be the fulfillment of a wish, must be proved afresh for every case by means of an analysis. I therefore select several dreams which have painful contents and attempt an analysis of them. They are partly dreams of hysterical subjects, which require long preliminary statements, and now and then also an examination of the psychic processes which occur in hysteria. I cannot, however, avoid this added difficulty in the exposition. When I give a psychoneurotic patient analytic treatment, dreams are always, as I have said, the subject of our discussion. It must, therefore, give him all the psychological explanations, through whose aid I myself have come to an understanding of his symptoms. And here I undergo an unsparing criticism, which is perhaps not less keen than that I must expect from my colleagues. Contradiction of the thesis that all dreams are the fulfillments of wishes is raised by my patients with perfect regularity. Here are several examples of the dream material which is offered me to refute this position. You always tell me that the dream is a wish fulfilled, begins a clever lady patient. Now I shall tell you a dream in which the content is quite the opposite, in which a wish of mine is not fulfilled. How do you reconcile that with your theory? The dream is as follows. I want to give a supper, but having nothing at hand except some smoked salmon, I think of going marketing, but I remember that it is Sunday afternoon, when all the shops are closed. I next try to telephone to some caterers, but the telephone is out of order, thus I must resign my wish to give a supper. I answer, of course, that only the analysis can decide the meaning of this dream, although I admit that at first sight it seems sensible and coherent, and looks like the opposite of a wish fulfillment. But what occurrence has given rise to this dream? I ask. You know that the stimulus for a dream always lies among the experiences of the preceding day. Analysis. The husband of the patient, an upright and conscientious wholesale butcher, had told her the day before that he is growing too fat, and that he must, therefore, begin treatment for obesity. He was going to get up early, take exercise, keep to a strict diet, and above all accept no more invitations to suppers. She proceeds laughingly to relate how her husband, at an inn table, had made the acquaintance of an artist, who insisted upon painting his portrait because he, the painter, had never found such an expressive head. But her husband had answered in his rough way that he was very thankful for the honor, but that he was quite convinced that a portion of the backside of a pretty young girl would please the artist better than his whole face. She said that she was at the time very much in love with her husband, and teased him a good deal. She had also asked him not to send her any caviar. What does that mean? As a matter of fact, she had wanted for a long time to eat a caviar sandwich every forenoon, but had grudged herself the expense. Of course, she would at once get the caviar from her husband, as soon as she asked him for it. But she had begged him, on the contrary, not to send her the caviar, in order that she might tease him about it longer. This explanation seems far-fetched to me. Unadmitted motives are in the habit of hiding behind such unsatisfactory explanations. We are reminded of subjects hypnotized by Bernheim, who carried out a post-hypnotic order, and who, upon being asked for their motives, instead of answering, "I do not know why I did that," had to invent a reason that was obviously inadequate. Something similar is probably the case with the caviar of my patient. I see that she is compelled to create an unfulfilled wish in life. Her dream also shows the reproduction of the wish as accomplished. But why does she need an unfulfilled wish? The ideas so far produced are insufficient for the interpretation of the dream. I beg for more. After a short pause, which corresponds to the overcoming of a resistance, she reports further that the day before she had made a visit to a friend, of whom she is really jealous, because her husband is always praising this woman so much. Fortunately, this friend is very lean and thin, and her husband likes well-rounded figures. Now, of what did this lean friend speak? Naturally, of her wish to become somewhat stouter. She also asked my patient, "When are you going to invite us again? You always have such a good table." Now the meaning of the dream is clear. I may say to the patient, "It is just as though you had thought at the time of the request, 'Of course I'll invite you so you can eat yourself fat at my house and become still more pleasing to my husband. I would rather give no more suppers.' The dream then tells you that you cannot give a supper, thereby fulfilling your wish not to contribute anything to the rounding out of your friend's figure. The resolution of your husband to refuse invitations to supper for the sake of getting thin teaches you that one grows fat on the things served in company. Now only some conversation is necessary to confirm the solution. The smoked salmon in the dream has not yet been traced. How did the salmon mentioned in the dream occur to you?" "Smoked salmon is the favorite dish of this friend," she answered. I happen to know the lady, and may corroborate this by saying that she grudges herself the salmon just as much as my patient grudges herself the caviar. The dream admits of still another and more exact interpretation, which is necessitated only by a subordinate circumstance. The two interpretations do not contradict one another, but rather cover each other, and furnish a neat example of the usual ambiguity of dreams, as well as of all other psychopathological formations. We have seen that at the same time that she dreams of the denial of the wish, the patient is in reality occupied in securing an unfulfilled wish, the caviar sandwiches. Her friend, too, had expressed a wish, namely to get fatter, and it would not surprise us if Our Lady had dreamt that the wish of the friend was not being fulfilled, for it is her own wish that a wish of her friend's, for increase in weight, should not be fulfilled. Instead of this, however, she dreams that one of her own wishes is not fulfilled. The dream becomes capable of a new interpretation. If in the dream she does not intend herself, but her friend, if she has put herself in the place of her friend, or, as we may say, has identified herself with her friend. I think she has actually done this, and as a sign of this identification, she has created an unfulfilled wish in reality. But what is the meaning of this hysterical identification? To clear this up, a thorough exposition is necessary. Identification is a highly important factor in the mechanism of hysterical symptoms. By this means, patients are enabled in their symptoms to represent not merely their own experiences, but the experiences of a great number of other persons, and can suffer as a